The fatal shooting of a 16-year-old boy in Dorchester has been a harsh reminder about the persistent threat of gang violence. Preventing that violence requires action by many people, from the home to community and public agencies. Our guest has been working at prevention as the founder and executive director of the Dorchester Youth Collaborative. We'd like to welcome Emmett Folgert. Thank you very much for being with us, Emmett. We have one teen who was killed. We have two others who are being held without bail and charged with murder. Talk about the pain here for the three families involved.
Yeah, yesterday I was thinking about all three families and the profound sense of loss that they must have. I'm thinking of them walking around their apartment and seeing things like a worn pair of sneakers. What do you do with them? Where do you put them? Beds that were slept in recently by their children. Who knows when they'll be back? It's an amazing pain these families are going through right now.
You know, when we hear about violence, and I think I've even heard this for you, that a huge percentage of this comes from a very small part of the city, and yet on the other hand, this threat of gang violence, you can't write off. This only affects a few people. We don't have to worry about it.
Right. Well, we know the numbers pretty well. It's 80% roughly of violence occurs in 5% of the area. But if you live in that area, and especially if you're young, you're 100% affected. You definitely have seen violence. You have been intimidated. It's part of your life. It determines how you walk to the store. It brings all of your achievement levels down too, every one of them. Reading, math, you're busy, your mind is so busy and concerned. It's hard to learn.
Without getting too deep into the intentions of people here, one of the reports we have said that the teen who was killed, Jonathan Dos Santos, he at least talked about this to someone in his school. I guess it was at least minimally on the radar screen, and yet the worst outcome happened here.
Yeah, I don't know what happened yet. I'm saying I think that it was gang related because of where the homicide occurred, the ages of the young people involved in broad daylight. Sounds like a gang homicide to me.
What about the ability to prevent this? What do you need to do?
Well, some of the things actually were happening. There were some strengths that Jonathan had. He was a good athlete. He played in one of our basketball leagues, and he played in football league. He was going to school and having some achievement there. But there are other things that we can do too. We know that jobs help. We know that jobs help. It gives a young person a sense of purpose, a connection to the community and their family. They just walk in the door differently. Hey, let me buy that milk, let me buy those eggs. It's a huge difference about how a person feels about themselves and how the people who love them feel about them.
I guess it also makes a difference in the structure of your day, where they are and what they're doing.
Absolutely. Now, if we're talking about gangs, I think we have to look at ourselves, as adults, probation officers, parents, youth workers, ministers, anyone who's in the lives of these children, and realize we can find out who's in a gang and who's not in a gang. It's a very public status. It's usually on Facebook media. They usually put it on there. They stand in certain gang corners for hours. We can notice that they're there. They tell people, they don't hide it. And we need to search a little bit harder, all of us, and not let this become sort of white background noise. Oh, well, a lot of these kids in this neighborhood are in the gang. No, if Joey's in the gang, let's get together, and not to have a talk, to have an intervention. Because if he's gone that far, he's way down the line. That's not an early sign. He's in danger now. And we should even consider relocations, absolutely. And geographic restrictions. Probation officers and judges out there, if you've got good evidence that this young person's in a gang, they could be 14 years old, find out where that gang hangs, the territory they claim, put a GPS device on that kid as part of their probation, and don't allow them to be there. Put a time restriction. that matches with the community intelligence about the gang. When is that gang operating? Well, guess what? You're home. Now, we've got to take this all more seriously.
What about the social media? On the one hand, I can imagine a teenager wanting to make it so that parents couldn't find out information. But on the other hand, you post on social media because you do want people. So what's the line here?
Well, the first thing they do is block you. Teenagers will block you. But somebody knows. Usually, certainly the brothers know, and the sisters know, a cousin. Parents ask around, and parents say, I won't tell them you told me, but tell me, is Joey in a gang or not? You've got to start with good information, and you can get it.
But what's the next step? Because you're in the family, you find out that your younger brother's involved in a gang, and these days you say, what am I going to do? Call the police and get them in trouble? So what's the best way for them to go?
Well, look at your network of people, family and friends that care about this kid the most. Get them together and take some serious steps. I'm saying including relocation if you have to for a while, to break the pattern of this kid being in a gang. And continue to monitor it and stay on it until you're sure that kid is not in a gang.
What about the relocation? I mean, this is in the case of Jonathan Dos Santos, his family did relocate to what they thought was going to be a safer neighborhood.
They didn't go far enough, apparently. Yeah.
What about the longer term for these kids? Because you can sort of ice things for the summer, but later on there will be some other things coming at them. What can be done about that?
We've seen successful interventions before. A team is a group that has a leader. It's an adult leader. We can do the mapping now. We know exactly where gang crimes occur. We can flood those particular hotspots with opportunities to join positive groups. The group's not the problem, it's the values and the leadership. There should be no kid and there should be no obstacle for a child who lives near Fuller in Washington to be in sports 12 months a year. Nothing should get in the way of that. And all of those kids should have summer jobs. All of these kids should have the same kind of opportunities after school to do something constructive and exciting as kids in wealthier communities do. It's hard to have equity in society, but we could have equity there. Every kid could have a good activity they could go to after school. We know it works in the suburbs, and it does. It works with these kids too.
What about that neighborhood in terms of places that kids can go to, safe havens with lots of things to engage? I know the Dorchester YMCA is pretty close to there, but is that enough, or are there other things that they can look at?
I don't think it's enough. I think our funding for those kind of programs has actually gone down, both in the private sector and certainly the federal money has been gone for quite some time. And the city has been pretty steady, but it hasn't really gone up. I think if anything, there are fewer opportunities now than there were.
I want to come back to the ability of a young person to say no, because one of the narratives we've heard about Jonathan Dos Santos, whether it's verified later or not, is that he was intimidated and he didn't really want to get involved, but he was so scared that maybe he might have felt he had no alternatives but to protect himself in some way. How strong is that intimidation?
Yeah, well, I want to make it clear I didn't know JoJo. That was his name.
We're talking generally here about kids.
He was in our league, though, so I can say that was a positive thing. He was in a basketball league, so other staff did know, but I didn't personally know him. Look at how malleable 12 to 16-year-olds are. Everybody knows that. They can get intensely involved in something today and then not care about it later. But of course, the problem that they have to be aware of, and we have to be aware of, is that getting involved in a gang is not so easy to get out. It's easy to get in, but it's not easy to get out. And that's why we have to take it more seriously. But it's more the peer pressure. And if we can just watch the gang growth, development in an area and try to stop it as soon as we can by providing other alternatives and doing things to disrupt it.
She mentioned if anybody does want to get in touch with you at Dorchester Youth Collaborative,
Sure.
what's the best way to follow that up?
Call the phone. Sure.
Just Google Dorchester Youth Collaborative.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being with us. Emmett Folgert,
Very good.
the Dorchester Youth Collaborative. We'll have more news in just a moment.